Chapter 96. After a while. The imperial prison is our territory anyway. Your brother won't suffer there. If you want, you can go see him at any time. As for releasing him, I'll see when the emperor is in a good mood. I'll plead for mercy for you. Wang Zhen thought about it, but he still didn't want to release Xisheng. Firstly, he wanted to give the officials an explanation. He couldn't just release Xisheng right after he started yelling about fighting and killing. That would be too obvious of favoritism. Secondly, he wanted to give the other eunuchs a warning. If they dared to make a move without permission, they had to be prepared to go to the imperial prison. Alright, we'll listen to Eunuch Wang. Xi Ning also knew that it would be inappropriate to release Xisheng now. He thought about how the officials were living a life worse than death in the imperial prison. However, his younger brother was there, which was equivalent to recuperating. There was nothing to worry about. Things seemed to have calmed down. However, through this incident, Yang Chendong saw some people's hearts. For example, his brother's behavior disappointed the sixth young master. Eldest brother, second brother, and third brother didn't come. Only fourth brother and fifth brother came to see him. Fifth brother came alone. After seeing that Yang Chendong was fine, he left with peace of mind. Not only did fourth brother come, but he also brought Duke of Wei Su Qin's eldest son, Su Chengzong. Yang Chendong naturally knew why his three brothers didn't come. First, it was because Yang Chendong had offended Xisheng and Xi Ning. They were afraid of being implicated, so they didn't dare to come. Fifth brother was more honest and didn't think too much. As for fourth brother, he obviously came for something. In the side hall, Yang Chendong walked out with Xiao Yin and Lady Snow on his left and right. Immediately, Yang and young master Su Chengzong looked at him enviously, as if he was a pig. Thank you for your trouble, fourth brother and young master Su. Yang Chendong sat down and cupped his hands, looking as if he still couldn't walk properly. When it came to serious matters, Yang seemed to be a lot more agitated. Sixth brother, you've suffered a lot this time. That Xisheng is really too much of a bully. Do you want me to find a few people to secretly beat him up? Oh. Fourth brother has this kind of ability? Yang Chendong knew that Yang Chendong was putting on an act in front of him, but he still pretended to be surprised, as if he would agree at any time. Seeing that Yang Chendong was about to get serious, Yang Chendong's complexion immediately changed. He changed his tone and said, "Revenge is a dish best served cold. Let's wait for a while. When the limelight is over, it won't be too late to deal with him." Yang Chendong smiled and shook his head. His fourth brother was already in his 30s, but sometimes he behaved like a child. Yang Chendong naturally wouldn't mind. Instead, he looked at Su Chengzong and cupped his fists. "Brother Su, I'm really sorry to trouble you to come here. Sixth young master, please don't say that. In fact, this young master has come here to ask for a favor." Su Chengzong's expression was somewhat conflicted, as if he had something to ask but didn't know how to say it. "Oh. Brother Su, feel free to speak your mind. There are no outsiders here." Yang Chendong didn't even look at Xiao Yin and Madame Shui. They were going to be his women, so of course, they weren't outsiders. Xiao Yin and Madame Snow were very excited by Yang Chendong's actions. Their gazes on Yang Chendong became much gentler. Originally, Su Chengzong couldn't say some things in front of the two women. However, since Yang Chendong said so, unless he gave up on his purpose, he had to say it. "Well, since the sixth young master doesn't treat me as an outsider, then I'll say it. Actually, in addition to visiting the sixth young master, I have another thing that Madame Xiang of the Nine Arts Workshop asked me to do." As he spoke, he paid attention to Yang Chendong's reaction. He didn't seem surprised or surprised at all. However, Madame Shui, who was standing next to him, seemed a little unnatural. Seeing that Yang Chendong didn't ask or interrupt him, Su Chengzong simply gritted his teeth and told him about Madame Xue's request. Seeing that the 100 Flowers Hall is about to close, Madame Xiang wants to learn some songs from the 6th young master so that more people can hear the sounds of nature. Yes, we've been listening to new songs recently. If we don't hear it, we'll feel uncomfortable. Young Master Su's idea is also our idea. Yang saw Su Chengzong give him a look and immediately spoke up to help him. One was the eldest son of Duke Wei, and the other was Yang Chendong's fourth brother. It was obvious that Madame Xiang had put in a lot of effort and was determined to get these two people to intercede. Unfortunately, Madame Xiang didn't know Yang Chendong, nor did she know his ambition. If Madame Xiang was just an ordinary entertainer, perhaps Yang Chendong would have helped her. He would have taught her 2 or 3 songs casually, which would have saved everyone's face. But who was Madame Xiang? She was a talent. Since she was a talent and Yang Chendong had met her, there was no reason for him to let her go. Madame Xue was already in his hands and on his bed. Where was Madame Xiang? Su Chengzong and Yang Chendong, who had been waiting for a reply, felt their hearts skip a beat. They thought that they would definitely get what they wanted, but something went wrong. Was Yang Chendong really not willing to give them face? I'm sorry, Brother Su, fourth brother. It's not that I don't want to give you face, but I think too highly of Madame Xiang. I think she just wants to be an entertainer and stay in the small 9 arts workshop. She won't be able to achieve anything in her life. It's better for her to come here. I have a big platform here, and I'm sure she'll have room to express herself. Then, she can learn more new songs. Yang Chendong's words were very clear. It was not that he didn't want to give them face, but he wanted to take Madame Xiang in. Since he wanted to keep her for his own use, why would he teach her a new song and let her have more strength to stand on her own? Hearing such a reason and answer, the two people didn't know what to say for a while. If it had been any other way to refuse, the two of them would have been angry. However, Yang Chendong had said that everything was for his own benefit, and that he wanted to take Madame Xiang in. What else could they say? Criticize him for being overbearing? No matter what era it was, there was one principle that didn't change. Those who were capable would rise, and those who were mediocre would fall. In terms of new songs, Yang Chendong's performance was definitely the best. He naturally had a certain amount of authority in this area, so it was hard for others to refute his words. That 6th young master, what do you mean by a big platform? Even though Su Chengzong understood what he meant, he still didn't want to give up. The Immortal Abode. The Immortal Abode that even His Majesty knows of is huge and has a good environment. It's not something a small 9 arts workshop can compare to. When the time comes, the number of customers there will be many times greater than the current 9 arts workshop. Singing new songs there will be more influence, and naturally, you'll be able to earn even more money. Yang Chendong's answer could be said to be powerful and resonant, thus making Su Chengzong and Yang shut their mouths. The Immortal Abode was still under renovation, and in order to maintain a sense of mystery, it didn't allow outsiders to casually investigate. However, its reputation had long since spread far and wide. Apart from the fact that His Majesty knew of it and had promised to personally attend the opening ceremony, there was another important reason for its influence. It was said that a total of 300,000 taels of silver had been invested. 300,000 taels. 1 tael of silver could be exchanged for 1,000 copper coins, and 1 copper coin could buy 2 small steamed buns. If that was the case, 1 tael of silver was equivalent to 1,000 yuan in the modern era. 300,000 taels of silver was equivalent to 300 million yuan in the modern era. It was just a restaurant, yet such a huge investment had been made. It was no wonder that everyone was so curious about it. As a result, the restaurant industry in the capital had already been dealt a heavy blow before it even opened. Some restaurant owners were already considering selling their businesses. They were worried that once the Immortal Abode opened, everyone would go there to spend money. What would they do then? A restaurant that hadn't even opened yet was already enough to make everyone in the same industry feel insecure, to say nothing of the common folk. They were all waiting with bated breath, wondering what the immortal abode would be like after investing so much money in it. Would it really become the abode of a deity? Yang Chendong was using the immortal abode as a platform, so a small 9 arts workshop naturally couldn't compare to it. Su Chengzong, who was still a little unconvinced, couldn't say anything more. After a while, the two of them dejectedly left. Yang Chendong and the other two remained in the side hall. "Young master, have you really taken a liking to Lady Xiang?" Out of curiosity or jealousy, Madame Xue asked the question out of jealousy. Her dancing isn't bad." Yang Chendong didn't answer the question. Then, when he saw that Madame Snow and Xiao Yin didn't seem to care, he put on a straight face and said, "Let me tell you, I have a lot of property, and there are many opportunities for you to show off. Let alone the 3 of you, even if a dozen talents like you came, the young master would still be able to handle them all. So, don't even think about fighting amongst yourselves. If Lady Xiang doesn't come, then it's fine. But if she does, then we'll be good sisters. If I find out who played a role in this, I won't punish her. I'll just let her leave the Yang clan." Yang Chendong said these words very seriously and solemnly. It seemed that he rarely saw Yang Chendong like this. For a moment, Xiao Yin and Lady Xue's faces changed. Because they once had him, they were even more afraid of losing him now. They immediately knelt on the ground. "Young master, we're just asking. We don't have that kind of thought. Come on, get up." When the 2 women knelt, Yang Chendong's heart ached. He quickly reached out to help them up and held them in his arms. "I'll set a rule. Don't kneel so often in the future. What if you hurt your knees? The young master will feel sorry for you. Well, now let this young master see if you're really hurt. Let's go to the bedroom." Since the scene in the morning, the relationship between Yang Chendong and the 2 women had undergone a qualitative change. Although the last step hadn't been taken yet, it was only a matter of time. Yang Chendong, who already knew what was going on, decided to do both of them today. Now was the best time. How could the 2 women not know what the young master was going to do? For a moment, their faces flushed red. But how could they be a match for Yang Chendong, who was so powerful? Moreover, they had been looking forward to it. Now that they were finally going to get what they wanted, they were overjoyed. How could they back down? Not long after, the 3 of them entered the bedroom, and the sounds of spring filled the air. 100,000 words omitted here. Chapter 97. Jiao Arts Workshop. After Su Chengzong and Yang Yang left the Yang family manor, they came to this place and saw Cui Nar and Dong Hanxiang, who were waiting for news. In Lady Xiang's boudoir, the 2 of them told the story of Yang Chendong's request. Originally, it was a man's pride to be able to come to Miss Xiang's room. But today, they felt as if their butts were on fire. They left after telling her everything. They didn't want to stay a moment longer. Cui Nar, Miss Xiang, and her maid, Chun Tao, were left looking at each other. Cui Nar couldn't help but say, "Men are all bad. Dong Shui has already taken Miss Xue. Does he want to take our Xiang, Who does he think he is?" It was no wonder that Cui Nar was so angry. Miss Xiang was her money tree. Although Jiao Arts Workshop was not under her name, she was just a manager. In the words of the later generations, she was a senior manager. But here, her words carried a lot of weight. Once Miss Xiang left, the business of Jiao Arts Workshop would be greatly affected. At that time, her income would be reduced by more than half. How could she live then? Cui Nar's tone was resolute. Miss Xiang heard it, but she acted as if she didn't hear it. Instead, she said something that surprised everyone. "Sister, you can follow Dong Shui like Mu Lily. When the time comes, as long as I make this request, I'm sure he will agree. What? Cui Nar was shocked. She stared at Miss Shui as if she didn't know her. You really want to go to Dong Shui? He is indeed talented, but he already has a powerful person like Miss Shui. If you go there, what status will you have? Will you be a concubine? Sister, I don't understand what you're saying. With our background, who can we be the first wife if we were to be with him? If we're lucky, we'll be pampered for a few more years. If we're unlucky, we'll be treated like a maid in the end. Even if Madame Shui is one step ahead of us, so what? She can't become a wife either. Even if she can become a concubine, it depends on Dong Shui's mood. As she spoke, Lady Xiang shook her head with a sad expression. This was the tragedy of the hierarchy. As a concubine, she seemed to be glorious in front of others, but in reality, she was just a lowly person. She was even worse than an ordinary person. With this kind of status, which good family would want them? Even if she did meet one and married him, as she aged, the number of people who had a good ending could be counted on one's fingers. Cui Nar was speechless for a while after being exposed by Madame Xiang. She sat there for a long time without saying anything. Sister, just promise Xiang that you'll go to the East Marshal's place with her. Otherwise, if something like what happened in 100 Flowers Hall happened in our 9 Arts workshop, do you think someone as daring as Dong Shui would appear? For the sake of performing artists like us, you're willing to offend the nobles and even take a stab? Forget it, that kind of person will never appear in the future. Madame Xiang shook her head as she spoke. This time, she was able to make the decision to side with Yang Chendong so quickly because of the 100 Flowers Hall incident. Perhaps this Dong Shui really was someone who had tender feelings for the fairer sex. After Madame Xiang made her decision, she began to convince Cui Nar. In the end, she was actually convinced. She agreed to let Madame Xiang find Yang Chendong and serve him. In exchange, she had to hand over Cui Nar and the servant girl Chun Tao's indenture contracts. After making her decision, Madame Xiang left the 9 Arts workshop. She brought the servant girl Chun Tao with her and headed straight for the Yang Manor 15 li south of the city. Inside the Yang Manor, Yang Chendong had already walked out of his bedroom, leaving behind Xiao Yin and Madame Shui, whose bodies were as soft as shrimps. Being young really was a good thing. Add that to the fact that he had great stamina, and Yang Chendong fought the 2 girls until they begged for mercy and fainted on the bed. He only rested for a short while before returning to the rear courtyard to continue training the 100 or so servants of the Immortal abode. Compared to 2 days ago, these people had improved quite a bit. With the addition of Mu Lily as a manager, these people became much more obedient. Just as he was watching them train with satisfaction, Tiger's Mane appeared. He half knelt and said, "Young master, Madame Xiang is here." "Oh, so fast." Yang Chendong was satisfied with the other party's decisiveness. If there hadn't been any news from her, he would have had to consider whether or not to give up on her. Even though this girl who looked a lot like the young Guanjilin of the future had indeed moved his heart, if she didn't want to rely on him, he wouldn't force her against her will. There were countless beautiful women in the world. How could he possibly have all of them? From Yang Chendong's point of view, there had to be a foundation of feelings between men and women. Otherwise, what difference would it be from going to the red light district to find a woman? Bring her to the side hall to wait, Yang Chendong instructed. After the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Madame Xiang and her maid, Chun Tao, arrived at the side hall in the rear courtyard. As soon as they sat down, the sound of footsteps could be heard nearby. It was Yang Chendong, dressed in green robes, walking in. When she saw Yang Chendong's figure from afar, Madame Xiang fell to her knees with a thump. As soon as the 6th young master entered the hall, her charming voice rang out. "Dong Shui, Xiang, begs you to take me in. My older sister, Cui Na, and my maid, Chun Tao, are also here." In the future, even if I have to work like a cow or a horse, I'll be satisfied with just a mouthful of rice to eat. You don't need to work like a cow or a horse. What you need to do is to rise above others, Yang Chendong replied firmly. Then, he looked at Tiger's Mane, who was standing in the hall. Do you know what to do? Also, after you take their slave contracts, find Mao Mu and tell him that you will raise their registration. Yes. Tiger's Mane cupped his fists and agreed. Then, he stepped back. Madame Xiang and Chun Tao were left behind. They looked at Yang Chendong, who had just sat down, in surprise. What's wrong? Why are you looking at me like that? Yang Chendong was very puzzled. He thought that there was something on his face, so he touched it with his hand, but found nothing. Dong Shui. What did you just say? You said that you will raise our registration? Madame Shui looked at him in disbelief. She was afraid that she had misheard him. That's right. What's wrong? Didn't my fourth brother tell you? Alas, it's my fault. I didn't tell you clearly. Now, I won't hide it from you. Madame Shui and the other two have been raised and have become good people. Yang Chendong thought about it. It seemed that he really didn't mention it to his fourth brother. He couldn't help but smile and didn't take it seriously. However, this was not a big deal in Yang Chendong's eyes. In Madame Xiang's eyes, it was completely different. If a lowly person wanted to raise their status, it was not only possible to spend a lot of money, but also needed the approval of the higher-ups. It even needed someone from the palace to do it. These conditions were far beyond their ability and they didn't dare to think about it. However, all of this seemed to be a piece of cake for Yang Chendong. He just needed to say a few words and someone would do it for him. This was the power of authority. It was far from something that ordinary people like them could imagine. After receiving Yang Chendong's affirmation, Madame Xiang immediately burst into tears of joy. Chun Tao, the maid beside her, also couldn't stop crying. Yang Chendong, on the other hand, hated seeing women cry the most. He couldn't quite accept it, so he found an excuse to get them to bring Cui Na, over as well, and let Yang Si and Yang Wu follow them to do their errands. Tiger's Mane was very efficient. They received the order in the morning, and everything was done in the evening. They brought 3 new contracts with the official seal of the Ming Dynasty. That was to say, from this moment on, Madame Xiang and the other 2 were free. They were no longer lowly people who were looked down upon by others. They were dignified girls from good families. The 3 of them hugged each other and cried for a long time. In the inner courtyard, Yang Chendong called Xiaoyin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang and told them the rules of the Yang family in front of them. Regardless of one's background, contribution and hard work were all important. As long as one was willing to put in the effort, they would be richly rewarded. On the other hand, if one wanted to use their status to bully others, then they should prepare to leave the Yang family. None of the 7 girls complained about this, and they all expressed that they would do their best. With the addition of Madame Shui and Madame Xiang, Yang Chendong's training program sped up, and everything proceeded smoothly. At this time, the interior of the Immortal abode was in the final stages of its renovation, and it would be ready to open for business in half a month. The goods produced in Crimson City were transported by sea to Tientsin, where they would be transported to the capital. With Wang Zhen's help, the journey to the capital was smooth and unimpeded. A large number of goods were transported to the capital's Immortal abode, and the 100 men and women who had been trained began to take up their posts. They used what they had learned to manage everything in an orderly fashion. Worth mentioning were the 2 leaders, Mu Lili and Cui Na. Their methods of management were far superior to Yang Chendong's. The 100 men were divided into 2 groups, each led by one of them. For a moment, there seemed to be competition between them, which greatly increased the efficiency of the work. They had originally thought that they would need another 7 or 8 days to sort everything out, but thanks to the efforts of the two former Procura sisters, they could open for business ahead of time. An auspicious date was chosen, and the opening was set for the 6th day of the 10th month. Yang Baozhong had already announced the opening of the Immortal Abode on the 6th day of the 10th month, and he had also emphasized that the Immortal Abode would be issuing membership cards to serve its esteemed guests. Only members would be allowed to use the private rooms on the 2nd floor, and the private rooms on the 1st floor would allow them to enjoy a higher quality of service. Moreover, on the opening day of the Immortal Abode, members would be able to enjoy the festivities with the emperor and the various ministers, and they would be able to interact with the people up close. As for the specifics, they could consult the Immortal Abode. Chapter 98. As soon as the news spread, many people flocked to the Immortal Abode like a flock of ducks, especially wealthy merchants. They all came to the information desk outside the Immortal Abode to ask for advice. The person who received them was the Immortal Abode's external manager, Yang Fu. Using his silver tongue, he managed to sway everyone who came, telling them all about the benefits of a membership card. For example, a membership card was a symbol of one's status, allowing them to enjoy a higher level of service and be looked upon with respect. With a membership card, they could enter private rooms or private rooms on the 2nd floor, allowing them to interact with even more important figures. With a membership card, once a friend came here and received it, it would be equivalent to gaining unparalleled face. They would be dazzled, and at the same time, treat you with even more respect. More importantly, the money used to apply for a membership card wasn't given to the Immortal Abode. Instead, it was deposited here first, saving them the trouble of bringing large amounts of silver with them when they came out to spend. More importantly, with a membership card, they could also enjoy a discount when they spent money. In descending order, there were 4 types of cards: platinum card, gold card, and silver card. These could be bought with money. What couldn't be bought with money was the Supreme card. With this card, spending was completely free. Of course, those who could obtain a Supreme card were also not ordinary people. For example, up until now, the only person who had such a card was the real owner, Yang Chendong. Platinum card, a one-time deposit of 20,000 taels of silver. You could enter any private room on the 2nd floor or private room on the 1st floor, and enjoy a 20% discount when you spent money. Gold card, a one-time deposit of 5,000 taels of silver. You could enter any private room on the 2nd floor or private room on the 1st floor, and enjoy a 10% discount when you spent money. Silver card, a one-time deposit of 1,000 taels of silver. You could enter any private room on the 1st floor, but not the 2nd floor, and enjoy a 5% discount when you spent money. As for non-members, sorry, but if they wanted to enter the Immortal Abode, they could only enter the main hall on the 1st floor. There were over 100 tables there, enough to accommodate over 1,000 people at once. However, no matter how lively the main hall was, if one didn't have a membership card, even if the private room on the 1st floor or the private room on the 2nd floor were empty, they still weren't allowed to enter. This was the benefit of the membership system. All membership cards can be used to deduct the funds in the card when spending money. In other words, as long as you had a membership card, you could come to the Immortal Abode without bringing a single copper coin. After eating and drinking, you could just hand your membership card over to the waiter and register your bill. Just imagine how cool that would be. Of course, the membership card also had a minimum limit. That was, when the amount was less than 1/10 of the original amount, there would be a reminder to remind you that you had to top it up again. Using a silver card as an example, 1/10 of 1,000 taels of silver would be 100 taels of silver. When the balance of the card was less than 100 taels of silver, the service staff would remind you to top up the card so that you could continue using it. At the same time, you could top up more silver in one go to increase your membership level. For example, if a silver card member were to top up 5,000 taels of silver, he would be promoted to a gold card member. Of course, for those who refused to recharge, once the amount in the card was used up, the card would be cancelled after 3 months. If they wanted to recharge, they would have to apply again. If there was a deficit in the previous card, they would have to make up for it. After Yang Fu explained the situation in detail, many people were tempted, especially those merchants who had money but didn't have high statuses. In the Great Ming Dynasty, a merchant's residence was ranked third. It was one level lower than the common people's residence, which was the so-called good family. People like them had a lot of money, but they didn't have high social status. The goal of many of them was to improve their social status by interacting more with the government. Now that the Immortal Abode had given them such an opportunity, how could these merchants, who wouldn't wake up early without benefits, not be tempted? Merchants were smart. It was precisely because of this that some people suggested that while the Immortal Abode's membership system seemed good, why didn't so many high officials and nobles come here to spend money? If only merchants came, then it would lose its original meaning. In response, Yang Fu confidently smiled and replied, "My lord has already sent gold cards to all officials of the third rank and above in the capital. Although it's a membership card that doesn't have a deposit amount, they can enjoy a 20% discount. I'm sure that they will definitely come. Moreover, when the Immortal Abode opens for business, even the Emperor, Empress, and officials will appear here. With this kind of influence, how could there be any worry that no officials will come? Here, there's singing and dancing, fine wine, and delicacies that can't be seen anywhere else. The environment is the best, and the service is the best. How could there be no customers?" When they heard that even the emperor would come here for the opening, the merchants were instantly filled with confidence. Those who paid to apply for membership cards came one after another. The Ming Dynasty had just gone through the rule of literature, and the country was rich and the people were strong. Many merchants had plenty of money, so applying for a membership card wasn't a big deal. Those with money directly applied for platinum cards, while those with less money applied for gold cards. There were even some who applied for silver cards as a test. They wanted to see if the Immortal Abode was as good as Yang Fu said, and then consider adding more money to apply for a better membership card. In just 7 days, the first batch of members was tallied up. There were more than 40 people with platinum cards, and the value of the cards was more than 800,000 taels. There were more than 200 people with gold cards, and the value of the cards was more than 1 million taels. There were more than 400 people with silver cards, and the value of the cards was more than 400,000 taels. In just 7 days, more than 2 million taels had been raised. When news of this money-making speed spread, the entire capital was thrown into an uproar. It had to be known that the Ming Dynasty had a very low tax rate, which was lower than the current 10% tax rate. In addition, the Ming Dynasty's taxes didn't count as business taxes. In theory, business taxes went to the emperor's private funds, but because there was no strict policy, the emperor could only rely on eunuchs to collect them. As a result, it was very unstable. For example, the Wanli emperor's private funds were even richer than the national treasury. The Chongzhen emperor was as poor as a dog. As a result, the entire Ming Dynasty's annual tax revenue was only 4 to 5 million taels. But before the Immortal Abode had even opened for business, it had already collected nearly half of that. How could anyone not be shocked? In the imperial palace, Wang Zhen was grinning from ear to ear after receiving the report from the Eastern Depot. He had originally been worried that the Immortal Abode wouldn't be able to bring him enough profit, but now, it seemed that he didn't need to worry at all. Wang Zhen immediately ordered the Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard not to disturb the Immortal Abode in the future. On the contrary, they were to increase the patrols in the area, and if anyone was found to be causing trouble, they were to be immediately arrested. As a result, the Immortal Abode's business rose to another level. No one dared to mess around here, and no one dared to eat for free. With such a good environment, it would only attract more and more people. After several days of preparation, the day of the opening finally arrived. It was currently autumn in the capital, and the weather was cool and refreshing, neither hot nor cold. On the morning of the 6th day of the 10th lunar month, the area where Zhengyang Gate and Great Ming Gate intersected was bustling with activity. The current emperor, Zhu Qizhen, had already been informed of this matter. Thus, after the morning court session, the emperor, who had always wanted to have fun, led a group of civil and military officials from the imperial city to the outer city, their target the immortal abode. Unlike the emperor's usual excursions, Zhu Qizhen had brought Empress Qianxia with him. This was something that Yang Chendong had specially invited. In his own words, this was called, the emperor's family enjoying the pleasures of the common people. Wang Zhen was naturally in full agreement with this. With the binding of benefits, the greater the immortal abode's reputation, the more benefits he would receive in the future. In the Empress Palace, Qianxia was rather excited. This was one of the rare occasions where she would accompany the emperor on an excursion. For this reason, she, who had never been good at dressing up, rummaged through her chests and drawers to find quite a few gold and silver ornaments. She had the palace maids help her try them on one by one, and in the end, she chose a dignified outfit. She wore a jade crown with dragon and phoenix pearls, a red robe with large sleeves, a red veil, a red silk skirt, and a red bead. Her hair was tied into a bun with dragon and phoenix ornaments, and the robe was embroidered with golden dragon and phoenix patterns. Such a dignified outfit was almost comparable to the one worn by the empress. Only then did Qianxia walk out of the imperial palace, satisfied. She boarded the dragon carriage and went with Zhu Qizhen to the immortal abode. When the emperor went on an excursion, his safety naturally had to be taken into consideration. Along the way, the embroidered uniform guards and foreigners from the Eastern Palace had long since filled the streets. Several thousand people had been mobilized, and their silhouettes filled the streets outside the immortal abode. Yang Chendong, who had already arrived at the immortal abode, didn't raise any objections. Although the appearance of the foreigners had prevented many commoners from approaching the immortal abode, this wasn't a place for commoners to spend their time. Besides, even though it was said to be enjoying the festivities with the commoners, there were too many commoners here, so there was no way to take care of their safety. If something were to happen, the reputation of the immortal abode would be completely ruined. Since the commoners couldn't get close, the area in front of the immortal abode was much more spacious. A red carpet over 100 meters long had already been laid out here. It was extremely eye-catching from a distance. This was the arrangement Yang Chendong had made to welcome the emperor. As they walked the red carpet all the way to the immortal abode, they basked in the attention of tens of thousands of people. The spectators had been changed from officials to commoners. By the time the emperor's dragon carriage arrived at the end of the red carpet, Yang Chendong was already waiting there in his green robes. In the entire court, it seemed that Yang Chendong was the only one who didn't wear his official robes and only wore his green robes. Everyone else was afraid that others wouldn't know his identity. Only this young master didn't care about what others thought of him. He continued to act according to his own wishes. This subject kneels to welcome your majesty, your majesty, your majesty. May your majesty live for 10,000 years. Please descend from the carriage and walk, Yang Chendong said in a booming voice as he knelt on the red carpet. Chapter 99. If it was any other time, this would be considered as blocking the emperor's way. But today, no matter if it was the palace guards or the ministers, no one tried to stop it. It was as if everything was perfectly justified. Hee, it's Minister Yang. Since that's the case, Empress, let's get off the carriage together and see what tricks he's up to. Ingzong, Zhu Qizhen, seemed to be in a good mood. As he laughed, he helped Empress Qian onto the dragon carriage and walked onto the red carpet. Long live the emperor! Just as they stood firmly on the ground, shouts sounded from all around them. A group of commoners who came to watch the show instinctively knelt on the ground the moment they saw the emperor's face. In addition, there were many people that Yang Chendong had arranged to guide the crowd. Instantly, shouts of "Long live the emperor" rang out from all directions. The momentum was so great that it was much louder than the voices of the ministers in the imperial court. At first, Zong was shocked. He instinctively thought that there was some kind of danger and wanted to turn around and run. However, when he saw that it was the crowd cheering for him, he laughed and then raised his hand generously to the crowd. "Everyone, please rise. Thank you for your majesty." The crowd of commoners who came to watch the show climbed up from the ground and looked at Zhu Qizhan excitedly. Their expressions were filled with admiration, but more than that, it was envy. Zhu Qizhan seemed to enjoy this kind of gaze. He did not move quickly. It felt as if he was taking care of Empress Qian, but in reality, he was enjoying this moment of being the center of attention. Yang Chendong acted as if he did not know about this. He led the way in front and looked left and right from time to time. He used his insight to see if there was any danger in the surroundings. Even though the area was already filled with spies from the Eastern Faction Guards and the embroidered uniform guards, and the Security Bureau had also sent out quite a few people, it was better to be safe than sorry. If something really happened to Zong today, even if he didn't flee, he would still revolt. Fortunately, no accidents happened along the way. Even though the people were curious about what the emperor looked like, under the stern gazes of the Eastern Faction Guards, the embroidered uniform guards, and the warden's office of the 5 cities, no one had the courage to break the order and cause trouble. Zong held Empress Qian's hand and walked forward step by step. Along the way, he frequently raised his hand to the people around him to show off his might as the Son of Heaven. Just like that, when they were halfway through the journey, shouts suddenly sounded from all directions, completely drowning out the noisy discussions around them. In our great Ming dynasty, the mountains are the lofty heads. In our great Ming dynasty, the rivers flow like hot blood. In our great Ming dynasty, the trees are rooted to the ground. In our great Ming dynasty, the clouds hold hands. The vast plains are wrapped with jade belts, the fields are woven with colored silk, the winds of the great Ming rise, the mighty winds of the great Ming shake the heavens and roar. As soon as the majestic voice rang out, everyone was startled at first. Then, General Fan Zhong rushed out from the side to protect the emperor. Even Empress Qian turned pale at this moment. On the other hand, Zong, Zhu Qizhan, was surprised at first, but when he understood what everyone was singing, he suddenly burst into laughter. Good! What a mighty and majestic voice! What a good song! Beloved official Yang, is this the new song the people were talking about? Yang Chendong sighed in admiration. As expected of the emperor. His reactions were quick, and his composure was extraordinary. He strode over and said, "Your Majesty, this is the new song this subject composed. It's called, Our Great Ming Dynasty. Our Great Ming Dynasty is a good song." Good, good. You deserve a reward. When Zhu Qizhan heard the 50 male attendants of the Immortal abode singing the song together with the crowd, he was extremely happy. He even shouted out a good twice. "Thank you for your reward, Your Majesty." Yang Chendong was also overjoyed. He thanked the emperor on behalf of the 50 attendants. Ha ha ha, not bad, not bad. A song of praise made Zhu Qizhan very happy. His footsteps seemed to be much lighter as he continued walking. Our great Ming dynasty has many beautiful mountains and rivers. Our great Ming dynasty is rich in natural resources. Our great Ming dynasty's people are the most hardworking. Our great Ming dynasty is even more outstanding now. The 4 seas meet guests, the 5 continents make friends, the winds of the great Ming dynasty rise, the mighty winds of the great Ming dynasty shake the heavens. Along the way, Zhu Qizhan could hear the singing of our great Ming dynasty. He felt as if he was floating in the air. It wasn't just the emperor who felt this way. Even the officials following behind him felt their spirits lifted when they heard this majestic song. Some of the officials who were originally disdainful of the so-called new song began to pay attention to it at this moment. Only now did they realize that if a song was well composed, it might really be able to stir the hearts of people. Our great Ming dynasty was sung over and over again. By the third time it was sung, Ingzong and Empress Qian had already arrived in front of the Immortal Abode's gates. The entire area was covered in red silk, making it look like a sea of red. Your Majesty, this subject will be so bold as to invite the two of you to cut the ribbon. In addition, I would like to invite Lord Hu Mang to come forward as well. Yang Chendong knelt on the ground again and begged loudly. Cut the ribbon? What's the meaning behind that? Ingzong asked curiously. Your Majesty, cutting the ribbon means cutting the ribbon. It's an auspicious omen for the opening of a new store, Yang Chendong replied with a smile. Interesting. Beloved official Yang, please make the arrangements. Ingzong also wanted to see what cutting the ribbon was, so he immediately agreed. Since the emperor had already agreed, the empress naturally nodded with a smile as well. Empress Qian was also a beauty of her generation, and she was also of noble character. Since the two of them had agreed, the Minister of Rites, Hu Mang, naturally couldn't refuse either. Dressed in the robes of a standard second-rank official, he strode over to the ribbon-cutting stage in front of the Immortal Abode. In front of a window on the second floor of the Immortal Abode, a young girl saw Hu Mang walk onto the stage. She immediately shouted excitedly, young miss, look! Lord Hu Mang is also on stage. He's standing right next to His Majesty. That's enough, I saw it. Also, little Qing, can you not be so excited here? If someone hears you, they'll say that the women of the Hu clan have no manners. Hu Yanxiang, who was called Miss, pretended to be angry and glared at her maid Xiaoqing. Then she looked at the ribbon-cutting stage with a sweet face. When she saw that there were only the emperor, the empress, her grandfather, and Yang Chendong on the stage, her face was full of joy. Out of so many ministers, only his grandfather was called to the stage. Was this hinting at something? Hu Yan thought she was smart. She thought this was Yang Chendong's intentional arrangement. He wanted to raise her grandfather's prestige, and at the same time, express his special feelings for the Hu clan. This moved her greatly, but also made her regret it. What made her regret was that she only found out about Yang Chendong's assassination a long time later. Hu Zhangning knew his daughter's temperament, so he gave strict orders that no one was to speak of it. It wasn't until later, when Hu Yan went to visit Yang Duo, that she found out. She was so worried she cried. She even pestered her seventh sister to go to the Yang Chendong manor. Only when she saw that Yang Chendong was still as lively as ever did she finally relax. As someone who had been there before, how could Yang Duo not see Hu Yan's feelings for her seventh brother? She immediately smiled and told her seventh brother to give Hu Yan a gift. Her worries weren't in vain. Yang Chendong thought for a moment, then gave the most prestigious card in the Immortal Abode to Hu Yan. He even invited her to attend the opening ceremony of the Immortal Abode. With this card, Hu Yan had special privileges. Before the Immortal Abode was open to the public, she had the right to enter in advance. As a result, she was the first to witness the prosperity of the Immortal Abode. Today, she even brought her servant little Qing with her to the second floor of the Immortal Abode. She found the best vantage point to watch the opening ceremony. Hu Yan's heart was filled with sweetness. However, what she didn't know was that Yang Chendong hadn't invited Hu Yan to the stage because of her. Instead, it was because Hu Yan was the oldest among the civil officials. He was already 73 years old. Out of respect for the elderly and love for the young, he invited Hu Yan to the stage. In truth, Yang Chendong had also wanted to invite Duke Ying, Zhang Fu, to the stage. He was already 73 years old, but after considering that he didn't get along with Wang Zhen and the others, he didn't want to cause any more trouble. On the stage, Ingzong, Empress Qian, Hu Yan, and Yang Chendong had just taken their places when four women in kipeos walked out of the Immortal Abode's main entrance. They were Yang Duo, Qiao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang. The four of them were all extremely beautiful. Coupled with their exquisite cheongsams, they attracted everyone's attention as soon as they appeared. The 4 women looked like celestial fairies. Each of them carried a copper tray with a pair of scissors on it. These were the props used for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Wow! They're so beautiful. What are they wearing? How can their figures be so perfect? That's right. If my concubines wore these clothes, wouldn't they be just as beautiful? Faced with this kind of discussion, someone in the crowd quickly responded. These clothes are called kipeos. They're already on sale at the Sky Beyond Trading Company next to the Immortal abode. Even if you have finished products, you can also customize them. Is that so? Our great Ming Dynasty also has something like this for sale? That's great. I'll go take a look at the Sky Beyond Trading Company when I get back. After receiving this response, some of the men in the crowd became even more excited. They were already imagining what their wives would look like if they put on these beautiful kipeos. These kinds of discussions and responses could be seen everywhere in the crowd. The people from the Security Bureau had all become salesmen, working hard for the Sky Beyond Trading Company's future prosperity. At this time, everyone's attention had already shifted from the Emperor and Empress to Qiao Yin and the other 3 women. The appearance of the 4 women not only attracted the gazes of the spectators, even Yingzong and Empress Qian, who were standing on the ceremonial stage, looked at the 4 women with great interest. However, their eyes were filled with a kind of admiration. Chapter 100. Cough, we can begin now. He didn't want to draw too much attention to the 4 women. 3 of them were his women, and 1 of them was his older sister. He didn't like being watched and taken advantage of like this, so he urged them to begin. On the 2nd floor of the Immortal abode, little Qing was chattering away. Young miss, their clothes are so beautiful. They're just as beautiful as the one you brought back. Hu Yen replied absent-mindedly. However, she was thinking that if she was already Yang Chendong's woman, she would definitely have a seat on the ceremonial stage right now. Under Yang Chendong's urging, the ribbon-cutting began. Yingzong and the other 3 each held a pair of scissors and cut the red silk in their hands. The Immortal abode's workers, who had been arranged beforehand, removed the red silk covering the 3 words, Immortal abode. Not only that, but the originally red Immortal abode suddenly changed. The red disappeared without a trace, and was replaced by a bright, transparent, and sturdy-looking glass. It turned out that the red silk wasn't covering the outside of the Immortal abode, but rather the inside. When the red curtains were pulled open from the inside, what was revealed was the clear, transparent glass. The current Great Ming Empire only produced colored glass, and the quality wasn't all that great either. The sudden appearance of so many pieces of glass, and so many of them at that, actually covered the entire Immortal abode. It was easy to imagine just how shocking this was. Beloved official Yang, what is this? Yingzong pointed at the clear glass with an expression of shock. Replying, Your Majesty, this item is called glass, and it came from overseas. It is transparent, and can be seen from the inside, and can also be seen from the outside. It also has the ability to block wind and rain. When used in a room, it can allow light from the outside to enter the room, making it much brighter. In winter, it can even allow sunlight to enter the room, making it much warmer. Yang Chendong had long since expected this question, so he gave a simple answer. Good stuff. Yingzong couldn't help but sigh after hearing this. It's a good thing, but it's a bit too expensive. Just the glass used to decorate the Immortal abode alone cost over 100,000 taels of silver. If the scale of the project is even larger, I'm afraid the cost will only increase. Yang Chendong was afraid that Yingzong would ask for an exorbitant price and wanted to use glass to decorate the palace. Therefore, he immediately asked the question. Sure enough, after hearing how expensive this thing was, just the Immortal abode alone cost over 100,000 taels of silver. If it were to be installed in the entire imperial palace, even tens of millions of taels wouldn't be enough. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Then, he turned to Hu Ming and said, "Minister Hu, go back and supervise the Ministry of Works. See if they can produce such transparent glass." "Yes, Your Majesty." Even though he wasn't the Minister of Works, Hu Xiao still felt that the possibility of him creating one was too low. But since the Emperor had spoken, he naturally had to agree first. "All right, Your Majesty. Now, please enter the main hall of the Immortal Abode. There is still a program waiting for Your Majesty's personal evaluation." Yang Chendong didn't want to waste too much time on the matter of glass. He immediately invited the Emperor and Empress inside. "Understood." As soon as he heard that there was still a program, Ingzong immediately ignored the matter at hand. With a smile, he walked with the Empress into the Immortal Abode. While the officials were still curious about the effects of the glass and how it was produced, they saw the Emperor enter the Immortal Abode. One by one, they followed him in. As soon as they entered the main hall, they were greeted by the sight of a glass tower that made them gasp in surprise. Calling it a glass tower wasn't correct. It was more like a champagne tower. There were 5 floors in total, divided into a triangular shape. There were 35 transparent champagne glasses arranged on each floor. At the very top, there was only one glass. The further down one went, the more glasses there were. "Beloved Minister Yang, what is this?" Ingzong pointed at the transparent and exquisite glass tower with a curious expression. He'd originally thought that as the Emperor, he was already used to seeing all sorts of strange things in the world. However, after coming to the Immortal Abode today, he finally realized that there was no limit in the universe. "Your Majesty, this is called a champagne tower. There are 5 floors in total, and the meaning behind it is that Your Majesty is the supreme ruler of the world. At that time, when the champagne is poured from the top, the drink will flow down from the first cup at the top until all the cups are filled with champagne." Yang Chendong explained in detail, causing Ingzong's eyes to brighten up. His curiosity was also piqued. "Beloved Minister Yang, is there any explanation for pouring the champagne you speak of? Is it possible for us to do what we wish to do?" Ingzong asked playfully. "Naturally. Your Majesty is the supreme ruler of the world, so this matter should naturally be left to you. Servants, bring out the champagne." Yang Chendong laughed heartily as he waved his hand. A female attendant dressed in a black qipao immediately walked over and placed several large champagne bottles in front of the 6th young master. Yang Chendong handed a bottle filled with champagne to Ingzong and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, please." "Ah." He'd only asked out of curiosity. He hadn't expected Yang Chendong to agree so quickly. Now that he noticed that the officials had already walked into the hall, if he slipped up and spilled the champagne everywhere, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? Ingzong was a bit hesitant, and didn't immediately take the bottle. Yang Chendong seemed to have noticed the Emperor's awkwardness. He smiled and said, "This subject is so bold as to ask Your Majesty, Empress, and this subject to do this together." This was equivalent to sharing the risk. If something went wrong, they could push the blame onto Yang Chendong. Ingzong was overjoyed when he heard this. Today is an auspicious day for the Immortal Abode's grand opening. Everything will naturally be decided by Minister Yang. We will allow it. Thank you, Your Majesty. Yang Chendong had a flattered expression. Then, he took 2 more champagne bottles. After the 3 of them took one each, they stood in 3 different directions. Then, they raised the bottle and poured the champagne into the first glass on the champagne tower. Empress Qian and Ingzong imitated Yang Chendong's actions. They also raised their champagne bottles and poured the champagne into the tower. Pure champagne immediately flowed out, releasing a fragrant aroma and covering the entire tower like flowing water. The sparkling and translucent champagne flowed like a waterfall, covering every single glass and filling it to the brim. This scene caused the officials to cry out in surprise and cheers. Yang Chendong had already tested this champagne tower countless times to ensure its safety. So, regardless of whether this was the first time it was poured or not, there wouldn't be any problems. At first, Ingzong was very careful when pouring the champagne. However, after discovering that there were no problems, his courage grew, and he poured the champagne much faster. In the end, he was actually the first one to finish. Naturally, Wang Zhen and the others cheered loudly. After Empress Qian and Yang Chendong finished pouring the champagne in their hands, the 25 glasses in the tower were filled to the brim. Then, the sixth young master asked the emperor to take the first glass at the top. Empress Qian took the second glass, and Yang Chendong took the third. The other officials also stepped forward and took the 25 glasses according to their rank. Even so, there were still some officials who didn't get a glass of champagne. However, it was fine. Yang Chendong was already prepared. He waved his hand in the distance, and a row of male and female service staff wearing black waistcoats and black cheongsams walked over. Each of them held a silver platter in their hands, and on the platter was filled with champagne. Soon, everyone had a glass of champagne in their hands. Yang Chendong saw that the time was right, so he raised his glass and said loudly, "For the prosperity of the great Ming Dynasty, I invite everyone to drink this glass. Your Majesty, please. Please, everyone, let's drink together." Ingzong was in a good mood. He laughed and raised the champagne in his hand. "Your Majesty, please." The officials also gave him face and drank in unison. Then, they poured the champagne in their hands into their mouths. When it entered their mouth, it was sweet and refreshing. The taste was very comfortable, and after drinking it, everyone had a lingering aftertaste. "Not bad, this thing tastes very good." Ingzong had eaten all kinds of delicacies in the world. It was already not easy for him to give such an evaluation after drinking the champagne. Of course, with Ingzong's evaluation, it would be difficult to sell champagne in the future. After the champagne celebration, Yang Chendong personally led the emperor and empress to the second floor of the immortal abode. The other officials of the third rank and above were led there by the service staff. Those of the third rank and below could only stay on the first floor. Fortunately, they weren't receiving outsiders today, so the place was quite spacious. The private rooms could be filled as many people as they wanted. On the second floor, Yang Chendong led Ingzong to a private room with the best view on the left. The room was about 70 to 80 square meters in size, and it even had a private washroom. There was a soft sofa, a wine cabinet, a table, and chairs, as well as a bell tied to a string. Ingzong pointed at the bell and asked curiously, "What's this used for?" Replying to Your Majesty, "This is a bell. If there is any need, as long as you pull it gently, there will soon be service personnel outside." Yang Chendong reached out with a smile and pulled it casually. Immediately, a crisp bell sounded. Not long after, a voluptuous female attendant dressed in a black qipao walked in. "How may I help you, esteemed guest?" "Tell Madame Xue to prepare a song and a performance," Yang Chendong said with a smile as he watched the female attendant walk in. "Yes." After answering, the female attendant left, swaying her hips. Ingzong, who was watching from the side, nodded repeatedly. "Not bad, not bad. This is a good idea. Sir, we can also put something like this in our study. It will be much more convenient if we need someone to wait on us." Chapter 101. This servant obeys. Wang Zhen, who was serving at the side, hurriedly replied. On the other side, in the best private room on the right side of the second floor, Yang Chendong's eldest sister, Yang Fei, was accompanying Emperor Qian on the soft sofa and chatting. Yang Fei's health was not very good recently. Yang Chendong had been in the capital for a period of time, but he had not had the time to visit her. It was only when she had recovered recently that he could leave. Then, he would arrange such a mission to accompany Emperor Qian. As the eldest daughter of Yang Rong, Yang Fei was already 40 years old. However, because she had taken good care of herself and had inherited her mother's good looks, she looked graceful and luxurious. Sitting together with Emperor Qian, they could chat together. Similar to the men's private room, there was a separate bathroom and soft sofa. But what was missing was the wine cabinet, and what was replaced was an indoor swing. In this place, there was no wind or rain, and no one would notice, so they could swing as they pleased. It made people feel relaxed and happy. In addition, there was an extra chess table, which could be placed on several types of chess for people to use. If the guest needed it, they just had to pull the bell, and the service staff would send the required chess into the private room. For example, there was checkers. It was a type of chess that could be played by 2 to 6 people at the same time. The chessboard was hexagonal, and the chess pieces were divided into 6 colors. Each color had 10 or 15 chess pieces, and each player occupied a corner and had a chess piece of one color. Checkers was a board game that was widely spread and suitable for all ages. Gamoku. Not only could Gamoku strengthen one's thinking ability and raise one's intelligence, but it was also rich in philosophy and helped to cultivate one's mind. Moreover, the game was simple. As long as the 5 pieces were connected together, the horizontal and vertical lines could be counted. Modern poker and mahjong. These quickly became one of the favorite programs of the VIPs. At the same time, in order to take care of women, there were many drinks that women could eat on the menu. Men mainly drank tea and wine. Tea drinks, including single tea leaves and tea drinks prepared based on them. For example, ancient tea, bubble black tea, milk tea, fruit tea, etc. For example, Tiguanyin, Dahongpo, Longan red date tea, pearl milk tea, etc. Compared to that time, there were now beer and red wine. Beer was mainly made from sprouted barley or wheat, also known as malt. Red wine was mainly made from grapes, salt, and sugar. Far away in Crimson City, there was already a winery. Currently, it had been successfully developed and was in the midst of mass production. When they opened for business, the first batch of wine arrived. Although the quantity was still not a lot, the price was high, so it was barely enough. When the production was expanded in the future, the problem of quantity would naturally not be a problem. Presumably, at that price, most people would only be able to taste it. Not many people would be willing to spend so much money to reach a certain level. There were even more types of women in this aspect, and they were mainly divided into 4 categories. Layered drinks, 30 g of seedless melon pulp, 20 g of pineapple jam, 10 g of milk. He squeezed the watermelon juice and poured it into a cup. Add a little water to the pineapple jam and squeeze the juice. Take a clean glass and fill it with ice cubes. When all the ingredients are ready, pour all the ice cubes out of the glass and pour the milk into the glass slowly. It's best not to pour it on the glass wall. Then, use a spoon to slowly pour the watermelon juice into the glass, and finally the pineapple juice into the glass. This way, the layered drinks were completed. The most important thing was that the density was controlled well. Carbonated drinks, or soft drinks as they were commonly known. For example, cola, Sprite, soda water, etc. They were named Coca-Cola, Jianlibo, etc. Fruit and vegetable juices. Based on their characteristics, they could be divided into concentrated fruit juices, syrup juice, freshly squeezed fruit juices, diluted fruit juices, etc. They were named apple juice, orange juice, peach juice, etc. Milk drinks were drinks that contained a certain amount of fat and were made from it. For example, milk, soy milk, milkshakes, etc. They were named fresh milk, raw milk, sweet milk, walnut milk, and so on. There were already so many variations on the drinks, let alone the food. With the help of MSG, cooking wine, meat powder, and other condiments, the Immortal abode's food was even better than the palace's. Of course, from time to time, Yang Chendong would also send some MSG over. After all, if one's life was better than the emperor's, then it would be dangerous. Sigh, my sixth brother has always liked to mess around since he was young. Look at all the things he's made. As his big sister, I don't even know what to say. Yang Fei smiled helplessly as she looked at the menu of food and drinks. But if one looked closely, they would be able to see the pride and gratification in her eyes. Of course, as his big sister, she had also thought about Yang Chendong's changes. When he was young, her sixth brother was the most honest of people, the type who only knew how to study every day. But after he grew up, he changed so much that she couldn't recognize him. Fortunately, one was married in the capital, while the other was living in the Yang clan's old residence in Jianghu Prefecture. After not seeing each other for so many years, it was normal for people to change. Even though Yang Fei spoke of helplessness, her face was filled with pride. When Empress Qian saw this, she smiled and said, "Yang Shima is a man of good fortune." As soon as he arrived in the capital, he brought the great Ming's auspicious potato. Now, he's created this immortal abode. He truly is a man of ability. Even His Majesty praises him from time to time. That's because of His Majesty and Empress Qian's good fortune. How could it be the work of a little brat like him? Yang Fei naturally didn't dare take credit for her sixth brother. The current world was under the rule of the Zhu clan. It was only right for them to be respected. By the way, Madame Wang, Yang Fei is married to Wang Meng. Is Yang Shima married yet? Empress Qian asked casually. Perhaps this was a common problem for women. When they gathered together, they would always gossip about others. This. I really didn't ask him. But I don't think so. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept such an important matter from me, his big sister, Yang Fei said with a smile. Her little brother had grown up and was about to start a family. He was no longer the snot-nosed brat of the past. Not far from the Empress' private room, Yang Duo and Hu Yan had also reserved a room. The two of them had already lost count of how many times they'd rung the bell. There were many empty cups in front of them, and they looked like they wanted to try all of the drinks in the immortal abode today. I can't anymore, big sister Duo, I can't drink anymore. Hu Yan rubbed her round belly as she sat on the sofa and weakly shook her head. Her eyes were big, but her belly was small. She'd originally thought that she had some strength, but when she really started drinking, she realized that these things were really bloating. Even though there was a bathroom in the private room, she still ended up drinking until she was full. No matter how good the drinks were, she could only sigh. I can't either. Yang Duo also shook her head and sat down on the sofa. Then, her body half collapsed. These things are too delicious. I don't want to give up on any of them, but I can't finish any of them. I can't continue to waste them like this. Hu Yan couldn't help but laugh when she saw the usually dignified Yang Duo acting like a little girl. Big sister Duo, you're still afraid of wasting things? With such a capable little brother, you don't have to worry at all. That's enough. Are you praising me? Or are you scolding me? I'm basking in your glory today. If you didn't have a supreme card, we wouldn't be wasting things like this. Oh, right. Even I, as your big sister, only have a gold card with 5,000 taels of silver in it. How did you get a supreme card that doesn't cost you anything? Yang Duo retorted. At the same time, she stared at Hu Yan, waiting to see how she would respond. Big sister Duo what are you talking about? Hu Yan's face instantly turned red after being hit on her soft spot. Right at this moment, the sound of music came from the stage on the first floor. Hu Yan used this as an excuse to lean against the transparent window and look down. She could see everything on the stage clearly, so she said, Big sister Duo the performance is about to start. Let's watch it together. This little girl. Seeing that Hu Yan didn't answer her question, Yang Duo let her off for now. She sat on the indoor swing and watched the performance on the stage. The stage on the first floor was about 400 square meters. It was much bigger than the one in Nine Arts Workshop and 100 Flowers Hall. At this moment, a group of girls in gorgeous dresses walked up the stage. They were all sisters invited by Lady Xue and Lady Xiang to help out. They all had a foundation in dancing. Of course, they also became talents in Yang Chendong's eyes. It wouldn't be long before they became part of the Yang manor. The girls surrounded Lady Xue, who was wearing a festive red cheongsam, as she walked up the stage. She looked like a red flower set off by the green grass. She was so beautiful at this moment. Wow! She's so beautiful. After seeing Lady Xue's new outfit, the people upstairs and downstairs couldn't help exclaiming. Even in the private room where the emperor was, Zhu Qizhen kept nodding. He asked Wang Zhen, "Sir, is it because of this woman that Xisheng wants to kill Yang Shima?" "Yes." Hearing this, Wang Zhen felt cold sweat trickling down his forehead. After that incident, Yang Chendong said that he wouldn't pursue the matter. Wang Zhen locked Xisheng up for a while and then let him out. That night, his right leg was chopped off by Hu Changning, the town supervisor of the embroidered uniform guard, who was in a hurry to save someone. Because he didn't respond in time, when he came out, his legs were unevenly spaced, and he walked with a slight limp, becoming a real slope. This made Xi Ning very unhappy. He once told others that if he had the chance, he would teach Yang Chendong a lesson and make him like this to vent his anger. Chapter 102. Now that His Majesty suddenly asked about this matter, Wang Zhen's heart was startled. Ingzong hadn't asked about this matter since he'd handed it over to him. But who knew if the emperor was paying attention? Even an idiot could tell that the immortal abode was going to be a place of great wealth in the future. As a collaborator, he was sure to earn quite a bit. Even if it was for his own sake, he had to ensure Yang Chendong's safety. From the looks of it, he needed to remind Xi Ning not to go overboard. Otherwise, it wouldn't look good on everyone. When Ingzong heard Wang Zhen's ambiguous answer, he smiled and said, "This girl is so beautiful. It must be said that this Yang Shima has profited from a disaster. It's not wrong for him to suffer a blade for this matter." Yes, your Majesty is right. One who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune in the future. Wang Zhen nodded and bowed in agreement. On the stage below, the dancers took their positions and made their preparations. All sorts of joyous music rang out. After a joyous prelude that no one had ever heard before, Madame Xue finally opened her mouth and sang loudly, "Ai." Happy gongs and drums bring out the annual festivities. Beautiful dances bring out the jubilation of the solitary sky plains. The sun paints today red, and the flowers of life are our smiles. Ai. Today is a good day. Anything you wish for can come true. Tomorrow is a good day. When we open our doors, we welcome the spring breeze. The song was cheerful and bright. The theme was clear, and the meaning was clear. As soon as the song was played, everyone who heard it couldn't help but nod their heads. Choosing such a new song as the opening dance was just perfect. Coupled with the dance of those dancers, it gave people a visual impact and enjoyment. It was indeed the most appropriate scene. Madame Xue was also extremely excited. Wasn't this a performance for the emperor and all the other officials? Back when she was in 100 Flowers Hall, these people couldn't come because of their status. Even the fragrance of wine was afraid of the depth of the alley. But now, with the immortal abode as a platform, not only did they not feel the slightest bit embarrassed, they even felt honored. Things were just that miraculous. After the sixth young master took care of it, it was still the same thing, but it had a different ending and influence. Madame Xue was so excited that she tried her best to sing the song. She made the song sound festive, which attracted the applause of the people upstairs and downstairs. Some of the young officials were so happy that they even forgot that the emperor was not far away. They kept shouting that they wanted to reward them. It wasn't until one of their colleagues reminded them that they remembered that they were in the immortal abode, not the red light district they frequented. They all broke out in cold sweat, which made them look rather cute. In less than a cup of tea's time, the song ended. Madame Xue bowed to the audience upstairs and downstairs to express her gratitude, and then left the stage. Soon, 2 waiters in black jackets placed a small square table on the grandstand. There was a fan on the table, which was very eye-catching. It was time to prepare for the storytelling. But at that time, people had never seen such a thing. Storytelling was also a product of the late Qing and early Ming dynasties. For a time, no one knew what it was for. They didn't recall seeing anything like this in the repertoire they'd seen before. Just when everyone had not completely recovered from the good days and did not understand what was going to happen next, Yang Chendong strode onto the stage in a black robe. Yang Chendong's appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone couldn't help but wonder, what's going on? Could it be that Yang Shima was going to perform like an actor? Is he really going to disregard his status like this? People's views were the hardest to change. Even after seeing how different the immortal abode was, it was still the same. Yang Chendong was already prepared for this, so he didn't bother to explain himself. He strode onto the stage and stood behind the small table. Then, he reached out and grabbed the table. He raised it up high and smashed it down. Bang! The sound of the impact jolted many people out of their reverie. Today, the emperor, empress, and hundreds of officials have come to congratulate the immortal abode on its grand opening. In order to express his gratitude, Chendong decided to tell a story. Whether it was right or wrong will depend on the benevolent and the wise. Alright, let's begin. He brought up the emperor, saying that he was only going on stage because Ingzong was here. For a moment, no one could criticize him. As everyone's attention fell on Yang Chendong, wanting to see what kind of trick he was going to play, the table was smashed down again. Dao de 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, scholarly fame, Empress Ya, Empress Shang and Zhou, the 5 hegemons of heroes and hegemons of spring and autumn, rise and fall in an instant. A few lines of names in the history of the Qing dynasty, countless barren hills in the northern sea, the fields of the predecessors, the lands of the descendants, are said to be a fierce struggle between dragons and tigers. There was a pause as soon as the word battle was spoken. Yang Fu, who had long since prepared himself, led a group of attendants to applaud and cheer loudly. Good. With someone leading the way, a few of the officials were also shocked by the opening poem. They all began to cheer in unison. Yang Chendong began to speak amidst the cheers. Starting today, we will talk about the 3 kingdoms. The first chapter is called The Great River Flows East. What era was the 3 kingdoms? It was an era of turmoil and suffering, but it was also an era of heroes. We know that ever since Qin Shi Huang annexed the world, a unified country was established in this place. The Qin and Han dynasties were both unified countries. At the end of the Eastern Han dynasty, before the unification of the Western Jin dynasty, there was a special period. This is what we usually call the 3 kingdoms. Cao Cao once wrote a poem about this era: white bones are exposed in the wild, and there are no chickens for 1,000 miles. But at the same time, it was also an era of heroes. Only when the sea was turbulent can the true colors of heroes be revealed. In such an era, many people sacrificed their intelligence for the reunification of the country. For example, the ambitious and bold Cao Cao, the dedicated Zhuge Liang, the elegant and carefree Zhou Yu, the tenacious Liu Bei. As soon as Yang Chendong spoke, the people who did not understand what he was going to do immediately quieted down. They could tell that this was the story that the 6th young master was going to tell. Moreover, he was going to tell it in a way that they had never seen before. But it had to be said that this kind of format was very attractive. In less than a quarter of an hour, Yang Chendong began to immerse himself in the history of the three kingdoms. The entire immortal abode quieted down. Everyone's thoughts seemed to be driven by his mouth. Even some of the women who did not like history listened attentively. On the second floor, in the private room where Hu Yen was, the maid Xiaoqing could not help saying as she looked at the young lady who was staring at Yang Chendong through the glass. Dong Shuai is so impressive. He speaks so well. Even I can understand a lot of things. Don't say anything. Hu Yen suddenly turned around and gestured for Xiaoqing to keep quiet, giving her a fright. After turning around, Hu Yen turned around and stared out the glass again. Her face was filled with admiration, longing, and even pride. This was the man she liked. He would always be the best and most outstanding. In the immortal abode, Hu Yen wasn't the only one. There were also a few of the family members of the officials who had been invited, especially the unmarried girls. They were all staring at Yang Chendong with wide eyes. It had to be said that having a private room and glass was a good thing. They didn't have to worry about others seeing them. Their gazes could become unbridled. To hell with the gentlemanly behavior of a gentleman. Of the many girls present, it was inevitable that some of them would fall in love. Some of them had already decided that when they returned, they would beg their parents to send someone to the Yang clan to propose marriage. There were many times when women were just like men. When they took the initiative, it was quite frightening. Following Yang Chendong's analysis of the history and characters of the three kingdoms from shallow to deep, everyone watched with relish. Even Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect was completely captivated. As the emperor of a country, familiarizing oneself with history was a compulsory course. The ancestors had long ago passed down a message that history could be used as a mirror to determine the rise and fall of a country. However, what he had learned was the rigid teachings of those teachers. What he had learned was dry and dull. How could he possibly compare to Yang Chendong's? His explanations were so interesting and easy to understand. Sigh, if I had such a teacher back then, I don't think my studies would be so boring. Ingzong sighed as if he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Your Majesty, why don't we have Yang Shima speak to you alone in the palace? Wang Zhen felt that this was an opportunity to curry favor. How could he let it slip by? As expected, Ingzong was a little tempted. However, he quickly shook his head. Forget it. Yang Shima isn't even as old as us. There's no need to bring this up again in the future. Only now did Wang Zhen remember Yang Chendong's age. However, with his vast knowledge and steady temperament, it was easy to forget his age. It was this servant who was impetuous. Thinking that if Yang Chendong really became the emperor's teacher, the emperor's incompetence would be even more obvious. Thus, Wang Zhen quickly nipped this idea in the back of his head. On the stage, the first chapter, The Great River Flows to the East, was finally finished. Yang Chendong bowed and stepped down from the stage with a sentence, "If you want to know what will happen later, please listen to the next chapter." Good. One more chapter. An addicted official saw that Yang Chendong was about to leave the stage and hurriedly shouted. One more chapter, one more chapter. For a moment, there were many people who wanted to follow the trend and continue listening. Regarding this, Yang Chendong stopped in his tracks. He smiled and cupped his fists towards the crowd. As I said earlier, it's because the emperor is here that I came out to embarrass myself. If everyone still wants to continue listening, from tomorrow onwards, there will be other people who will continue telling the story of the three kingdoms. At that time, everyone can come and support me. Chendong thanks you here. Chapter 103. He cupped his fists and saluted the crowd, then walked off the stage with large strides. No matter what, he was still a dignified official of the 5th rank. How could he possibly tell stories for fun? The reason he was the first to do so was because the immortal abode had opened for business, and the emperor had personally come. He wanted to express his stance, and also because he wanted to earn the reputation of being the progenitor of storytelling. After today's events, anyone who tried to learn storytelling would follow in his footsteps. Such people had to be crowned as the progenitor of storytelling. Just the thought of it made him excited. Yang Chendong walked off the stage, and in his place, many people walked onto the stage. Soon after, the narrator's voice rang out. Next, please enjoy the large-scale musical, The Legend of the White Snake. The first scene of the musical was a shepherd boy saving a snake. The voice was spoken by Madame Snow, who had the best voice. It was a pleasure to listen to. Soon after, a child dressed like a shepherd boy walked onto the stage, followed by a snake catcher with a bamboo basket on his back. As the two of them appeared, the narrator continued to explain, Bai Suzhen was originally a little white snake that cultivated in the wilderness. One day, the little white snake was captured by Snake Elder and was almost killed. Fortunately, she was saved by a little shepherd boy who was passing by. Suzhen secretly swore that this life-saving grace would forever be engraved in her heart. Time passes easily in the mountains, but the world has been prosperous for thousands of years. After 1,700 years of cultivation, Suzhen finally shed her snake body and was able to transform into a human form. Originally, she wanted to go to Mountamay to continue her cultivation. However, after being guided by Guanyin, she remembered that there was still a relationship in the world that had yet to end. Following Guanyin's guidance, Suzhen came to Hangzhou's West Lake to look for the benefactor of her previous life. As the narration reached this point, a burst of exclamations suddenly came from the stage. It turned out that bursts of white fog had suddenly appeared. Everyone who had never seen such a scene before was shocked. They did not know what was going on. Some of the quick-witted ones even opened their mouths, ready to shout out the word flood at any moment. However, just as everyone's faces were filled with confusion and even panic, a young and beautiful woman dressed in white walked out of the white fog. Her fringe was slanted in front of her forehead, revealing part of her forehead, which made her look even more feminine. She was White Lady, played by Lady Xiang, who had shocked the world with her dance. As soon as Lady Xiang appeared in the gradually dissipating white fog, she immediately attracted everyone's attention. Some of the officials even had their mouths and eyes wide open. Saliva even flowed out from their chins. After the stunning appearance, Lady Xiang's equally beautiful voice was also brought into full play. Bai Suzhen at the foot of Mount Qingcheng, I've cultivated my body in the cave for 1,000 years. I've worked hard to achieve the Tao, and I've been reborn into a human being. Wholeheartedly following the Tao without any distracting thoughts, converting to the three treasures and abandoning the mortal world. I beg the Bodhisattva to enlighten me and save my chastity. Ha 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 ha. Lady Xiang, like Lady Shui, was soon remembered by everyone with the poem, The White Quality at the foot of Mount Qingcheng. In the women's private room on the second floor, Hu Yan looked at Lady Xiang with some envy and murmured in her heart, shameless, shameless. How many women have you had? Should I also hurry up? Suddenly, Hu Yan stood up abruptly and pulled Yang Duo, who was staring at the stage, and said, Seventh sister? Where is eldest sister? I want to see her. Eldest sister is in the room next to us. Yang Duo said without looking back. At this time, even if there was an urgent matter, she couldn't delay her from seeing White Lady. On the stage, Little Qing, who was played by the maid Chun Tao, also appeared. Then it was Cui Na, the former brothel keeper of the Jiu Arts Workshop, who was dressed as a man. After changing into a man's dress, she looked so delicate and handsome, which immediately attracted the hearts of many young ladies among the officials. Cui Na, who was in her 20s, originally thought that her career on stage was over long ago. She didn't expect that the sixth young master would give her such an opportunity. She naturally cherished it very much. Whether it was her lines or lyrics, she had practiced them many times in private. She had also prepared for today's appearance for a long time. When she saw the fervent gazes all around her, she knew that she had succeeded this time. The three women appeared, and for a moment, everyone was talking to each other. White Lady's dignified beauty, Su Xian's honest kindness, and Little Qing's lively cuteness were all perfectly displayed by the three of them. They became the classics of the day. When everyone's eyes fell on the stage, Hu Yan walked out of the private room and went to the room next door, where Empress Qian and the eldest sister of the Yang clan, Yang Fei, were. Good performances were endless, good food was endless, and good wine was endless. During the performance of White Lady's legend, lunch was sent to the various private rooms. The sight and taste were both enjoyable, and it made many people feel that the immortal abode was truly worthy of being called a place where immortals resided. After White Lady's legend, new songs were played one after another. Exploring Qingshui River, Friends, Wishing We Last Forever, Many Stories in a Small Town, and so on. These were all songs that had been circulating in the capital in recent days, as well as new ones. For a moment, the audience was filled with joy. Many of the young master's young ladies from important officials' families had even made up their minds. When they returned, they would withdraw money to buy membership cards. This immortal abode was simply too fun. This was especially true for the young ladies of the boudoir. They usually stayed at home, studying women's mantras. When would they have the chance to come out and play? And even if they did come out, where would they go? But now, Yang Chendong had given them a place to pass the time, and that was the immortal abode. Here, they could have their own private rooms, and they didn't have to worry about being seen by others. This allowed them to be even more unbridled. In addition, there were delicacies, desserts, and beautiful music that couldn't be found anywhere else. If they didn't know how to spend their money here, then they would have lived their lives in vain, and they would have let down their good backgrounds. The opening of the immortal abode was an eye-opener for everyone. Even the emperor and empress were satisfied, and they felt a sense of enjoyment that they had never felt before. Good times always passed by quickly, and it was time for the emperor to leave. Ingzong had originally planned to eat dinner here before leaving, but when he saw the crowd of people waiting to enter the immortal abode through the glass window of his private room, he gave up on that idea. It wouldn't be good for him to monopolize this place and ignore the feelings of the people. In the end, Ingzong left with Empress Qian and the other officials. It was clear that neither Empress Qian nor the other officials had any intention of enjoying themselves to the fullest. In response, Ingzong magnanimously expressed that they could come and play whenever they had time. Only then did everyone remember that the immortal abode had already opened for business in the capital, and they couldn't run away. They could come and play whenever they wanted, and only then did they leave, satisfied. When everyone left, they received a beautiful gift. It was a box of 4 beautiful transparent glasses. Before glass was a new thing, this gift was naturally viewed as a treasure. Anyone who received this gift couldn't stop smiling, praising Yang Jima for being so good at handling matters. After the emperor and his officials left, the immortal abode was filled with many young master sons of merchants and officials with membership cards. Because their status wasn't high enough, they naturally couldn't enter the immortal abode. Now that they had the chance, everyone wanted to be the first to enter. Many people entered, but they were quickly mesmerized by the exquisite decorations of the immortal abode. They looked around like country bumpkins entering a city. Soon after, fine wine and delicacies were served, along with new songs. These people's pockets were emptied, and they all sighed. Silver really was a good thing. The immortal abode's grand opening had cost them a lot of silver to entertain the emperor and officials in the morning and afternoon, but by night, they had made a killing. Only when the clock struck and the curfew was about to begin did they reluctantly leave. But at the same time, they agreed to come back early the next morning to drink tea, chat, and watch programs. This was truly one of life's greatest pleasures. Yang Chendong's group left the Immortal abode and headed for the Yang clan manor 15 li south of the capital. The sixth young master sat in the same carriage as Qiao Yin. After a busy day, Lady Xiang and Lady Shui were both exhausted. They naturally stayed the night in the Immortal abode, allowing Qiao Yin to be alone with the sixth young master. Her face was filled with happiness and joy. "Young master," Su Yozhen sent a message. The carriage suddenly stopped, and Tiger's mane appeared. He placed a bamboo tube in Yang Chendong's hand. Yang Chendong reached out and opened the tube. After taking out the secret letter and reading it, Yang Chendong calmly put it back. He then closed his eyes and thought for a while before saying, "Let him tell the imperial censor of the left, Wang Wenyi. He should know what to do." "Understood." Tiger's mane replied. He turned around and told his deputy, Yang Chendong, about the sixth young master's orders. This deputy director of the security bureau was a private member of the Yang clan that Yang Chendong rarely saw. Wang Wenyi, imperial censor of the left, a third-ranked official of the imperial court. He was different from the other important officials, who spent the day playing, drinking, and having fun. As imperial censors, their job was to supervise the officials. Although it sounded very impressive, there were many things they couldn't do about it. For example, they couldn't participate in something as beneficial as the Immortal Abode's opening ceremony. Since they were supposed to supervise the officials, how could they be part of the same group? There had to be a difference. As a result, those in the position of imperial censor were usually rather poor. Wang Wenyi was standing in such a position. Unlike everyone else, his life was still good. Not to mention other things, he had married as many as 7 concubines. Where did that come from? It was all given to him by his father-in-law. Father Wang was a general term used by some spineless people in the imperial court and eunuch Wang Zhen, who had absolute power. Chapter 104. Since he was called father, he naturally had to submit to someone else. It was precisely because he had submitted to Wang Zhen that he was able to obtain a high position, ride a fine horse, and even have a large group of wives and concubines. He had been given the position of imperial censor of the left in order to control the imperial censorate and prevent anyone from suddenly harming Wang Zhen. Even though he couldn't openly commit corruption like the other officials, he still had money to spend. After court, Wang Wenyi had nothing to do at home, so he was full of energy. It was now dark, and he was currently admiring the flowers in the courtyard with a concubine he had recently married. His personal attendant suddenly came to report that Su Yozhen, Su Qinghui, had arrived. "Please." A late-night visit was obviously an important matter. Wang Wenyi waved his hand and had a maid take the concubine away before heading to the central room. Su Yozhen was pacing back and forth in the room like an ant on a hot pan. When he heard the sound of footsteps and turned around to see Wang Wenyi, he immediately cupped his fist and bowed. "Lord Wang, I have no choice but to disturb you so late at night. Did something happen?" Wang Wenyi acted as if nothing had happened, but he was inwardly on guard. "Lord Wang, it's like this. Sun Qing, Dong Kund, Lin Xiangfeng, and Yin Meng, as well as Sichuan Imperial Censor Shenyu, have come to find this lowly official. They want me to join them in impeaching Crown Prince Yang Chendong tomorrow morning. This lowly official does not know what to do. I have come to invite Lord Wang over," Su Yozhen said with a humble expression as he observed Wang Wenyi's expression. "Impeach Yang Chendong? What's the reason?" Wang Wenyi became much more serious when he heard about Yang Chendong. As Wang Zhen's trusted aide, how could he not know that the sixth young master of the Yang clan was currently doing business with him? If something really happened, it would be detrimental to his father. It said that Yang Shima sent Immortal Abode membership cards worth several thousand taels of silver to the families of third rank and above officials in the capital, Su Yozhen said seriously. Last time, after being bribed by Yang Chendong, they put on a double act and had the opportunity to publicly impeach the sixth young master in the imperial court. Sure enough, according to the previous plan, the matter was left unsettled. From then on, not only did he receive a large sum of money from Yang Chendong, but he was also promoted by one rank. At the same time, he became an upright official in the eyes of many people. Even the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Yu Qian, who looked up to Wen Tianxiang as a role model, had publicly praised him more than once, saying that there should be more Su Yozhen in the court to ensure that the governance of the officials was clean. For this reason, when Sun Qing, Dong Kund, and the others were preparing to impeach Yang Chendong, they naturally found Su Yozhen. This was how Yang Chendong found out the news immediately and pointed the problem to Wang Wenyi. Is there such a thing? If that's the case, we'll just do what we need to do. Wang Wen was startled when he heard such a reason. If it was true, then with this reason, he could really make things difficult for Yang Chendong. However, what he couldn't understand was why Su Yozhen would reveal this matter to him in advance. The two of them didn't have any interactions before. Unable to understand Su Yozhen's intentions, Wang Wenyi simply pretended to be ignorant and acted as if he was doing official business. Seeing Wang Wenyi acting as if he was doing official business, Su Yozhen cursed in his heart for being a B***tch, and still wanting to pretend to be chaste. However, his mouth didn't stop as he said, "Lord Wang, to be honest, this official has respected eunuch Wang for a long time. If there is any opportunity to be of service to eunuch Wang, this official will not hesitate to die 1,000 times. I know. How about this, if I don't pass on the news to you, then do what you should do." These words allowed Wang Wenyi to understand Su Yozhen's intentions. It seemed that this person also wanted to get on Wang Zhen's good side. No wonder he still came to pass on the news at such a late hour. Although he understood Su Yozhen's intentions, Wang Wenyi's power was limited and he didn't dare to make a decision for Wang Zhen. Thus, he used this method to reply to tell Su Yozhen that he was aware of her attitude towards Father Wang. However, whether or not he would accept her still depended on eunuch Wang's opinion. Su Yozhen was a shrewd person and naturally understood the meaning behind the words. Immediately, her face lit up with joy. "Then I will have to trouble Lord Wang." As she spoke, she whispered, "This official placed a box in front of Lord Wang's backyard. Inside it is a token of my appreciation." Su Yozhen nodded without batting an eyelid, indicating that she understood. Immediately, she left the main room with satisfaction. Then, Wang Wenyi called for the housekeeper and asked him to bring in the box in the backyard. Not long after, he saw the neatly arranged 2,000 taels of silver in the box. These taels of silver were enough to cover several years of his salary. Wang Wenyi's face lit up with joy. "Come, change this official's robes. I want to see Father Wang." The capital had long been under a curfew, but for a third-rank official like Wang Wenyi, it was still extremely convenient for him to move around. This was especially so when he was eunuch Wang Zhen's subordinate. This was already a public matter, so naturally, no one dared to block his sedan. However, he didn't know that in the darkness, there was a pair of eyes watching his every move. It wasn't until he entered the palace that the owner of that pair of eyes left quietly. In the morning court session, as Zhu Qizhen sat on the dragon throne, all of the military affairs of the country came crashing down on him like a surging wave. Fortunately, the matters discussed in the morning court session today were all good matters. For example, Deng Maoqi's rebellion in Fujian was basically over. Deng Maoqi was killed in the chaotic battle, and his henchmen were either killed, captured, or escaped. It would be difficult for them to cause any more trouble. Minister of War Kuang Yi had just finished speaking when Minister of Revenue Wang Zhua said that the potatoes had fully matured. The next step was to distribute the seeds. If the emperor did not have any special requests, then he would have a good talk with Yang Shima about the seed distribution. "We don't have any other requests. We just want the potatoes to mature as quickly as possible." Also, we have to prevent the potato seeds from flowing out. Teacher, for this matter, have the East faction guards and the ironclad guard keep a close eye on it. Ingzong recalled the warnings that the officials had given him and added on. This official obeys. This old servant obeys. Wang Zhua and Wang Zhen both agreed. Ingzong nodded and said, "What other matters do you have? Bring them all up. This official has a memorial." Following a shout, Sun Qing, Dong Kund, Su Yozhen, and the other 4 imperial censors all knelt on the ground. When an imperial censor stepped out, nothing good ever happened. The officials all frowned slightly when they saw this. Even Ingzong was a bit displeased. These imperial censors were always the type to wish for the world to be in chaos. Whenever they had something to report, it would always cause him to be displeased. However, this was still their duty, so no one could criticize them. For this reason, he could only do his best to remain calm and ask, "Dear officials, what matters do you have to report?" "Your Majesty, this official is impeaching the Crown Prince, Yang Chendong." Before the Immortal abode opened for business, he gave membership cards to the families of all the officials of the 3rd rank and above in the capital. The amount of money involved is extremely high, reaching several 100,000 taels, Imperial Censor Sun Qing reported loudly as he knelt on the ground. "Your Majesty, Yang Chendong is clearly trying to bribe the people. Your Majesty, please punish him," Imperial Censor Dong Kund said. "Your Majesty, this is a sign of forming a clique for personal gain. This official requests that Your Majesty immediately issue an order to arrest this guilty official, Yang Chendong, and issue an imperial edict to investigate this matter," Imperial Censor Lin Xiangfeng said as he kowtowed on the ground. "Your Majesty." The other imperial censors also began to criticize Yang Chendong. From their words, it was as if this crown prince was already an unpardonable criminal. Looking at the imperial censors kneeling on the ground one by one, Ingzong felt a headache coming on. He really couldn't understand. He was just a minor class 5 official. He didn't have any authority and didn't have any position. How could he be so disliked by others? Bribing the people's hearts? Forming a clique for personal gain? Was this really a rebellion? Ingzong didn't understand, but the other officials were furious. On the surface, they were criticizing Yang Chendong for bribery, but they were the ones who had taken the bribes. This was basically a net that had brought down a whole bunch of people. As a result, the faces of all the officials of the 3rd rank and above in the imperial court turned ashen. Those with bad tempers could no longer suppress their anger. They began to criticize, "When did Yang Chendong give us money? He only gave us a membership card out of politeness. There was no money in that card." "That's right. There was only a card, but no money. How could it be called bribery?" The officials began to refute the imperial censors. Ingzong couldn't help but chuckle as he watched from his throne. It was rare for me to see an imperial censor infuriating the officials. Usually, when something like this happened, there would only be a few officials who were involved in it who would refute it. But today, when more than half of the officials opposed it, it was very rare. Ingzong viewed everything that was happening in front of him as a show. However, there were some people who didn't think that way. What they were thinking about was why there were people looking for trouble with Yang Chendong today after the Immortal abode had opened for business yesterday. Who had they offended this time? If they hadn't offended anyone, why were there so many imperial censors standing out at the same time? It was obvious that someone had colluded with them beforehand. Otherwise, how could there be such a commotion? The imperial court was divided into 3 groups. One group was composed of the imperial censors who were criticizing Yang Chendong. The other group was composed of the officials who had been implicated. The last group was composed of officials whose ranks weren't high enough and weren't involved. They watched everything unfold in front of them as if they were watching a show. The officials retaliated, and the censors rebutted, saying that they were only speaking on behalf of Yang Chendong because they had received benefits. Truly, everyone had their reasons. Until one person walked out from the class seat, everyone's eyes fell on him at the same time. Chapter 105. Your Majesty, please allow this subject to report. As soon as this person appeared, he didn't even look at the imperial censors. Instead, he directly knelt on the ground and spoke to the emperor. Beloved official, Yu has presented a memorial. Zhu Qizhen nodded as he looked at this left assistant minister of the Ministry of War Yu Qian, who was rumored to live a very poor life. He wanted to hear what he had to say. This person was precisely Yu Qian. Perhaps it was because of his incorruptibility that the imperial censors had a hard time finding fault with him. Now that he'd taken the initiative to speak up, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. Ignoring the gazes of his colleagues, Yu Qian spoke in a heavy voice, reporting to Your Majesty, this subject was fortunate enough to visit the Immortal abode yesterday and witnessed its luxuriousness. At the same time, this subject also received a membership card for the Immortal abode. Furthermore, this subject took the initiative to check it out and found that it was only a card with no silver inside. These words came from Yu Qian's mouth, and with his character, if he said he'd checked it out, then he must have. No one had any objections to this. Seeing that no one refuted him, Yu Qian continued, this subject later found out that with this card, one can enjoy a discount when spending money in the Immortal abode. Presumably, this is the only use of this card. As soon as he said this, Imperial Censor Sun Qing immediately chimed in, that's right, this is the use of this card. If someone uses this card to spend money, they can save quite a bit of silver in one go. In the long run, won't the total amount reach tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of silver? This is clearly Yang Chendong. Before Sun Qing could finish speaking, Yu Qian cut in, Your Majesty, this subject believes that this matter cannot be settled like this. This subject has already said that this is only a card, and that it can only be used if one spends money. As for someone like this subject, my monthly salary is barely enough to support my family. Where would I find the money to spend in a place as luxurious as the Immortal abode? As such, this card's existence is no different from a piece of scrap paper, completely meaningless. This subject believes that Your Majesty can ignore the words of the imperial censors and encourage the development of the Immortal residence. A place like this that can enrich the entertainment of the common people should be encouraged by the country. Only when there are more immortals like this, the country's tax revenue will be more abundant. In the long run, the treasury will be full, which is a good thing for the country and the people. Yu Qian changed his usual self and took the initiative to speak up for Yang Chendong. At first, everyone was a little puzzled. Could it be that this person also received some benefits from Yang Shima? Otherwise, why would he put in so much effort, not hesitating to directly insult the imperial censors? However, it wasn't until the last few sentences that everyone came to their senses. It seemed like this person's intentions were in vain. He had set his sights on the tax revenue after the Immortal abode flourished. Originally, when Yingzong heard Yu Qian's words, he was also suspicious. Could it be that this civil official who called himself Wen Tianxiang really wanted to go with the flow and clear his name like the other officials? However, when he heard Yu Qian's words, he finally understood. He nodded and said, Beloved Yu's words are reasonable. As the saying goes, only when the country is strong can the people live and work in peace and contentment. Teacher, I'll have to trouble you to investigate the Immortal abode's income. Afterwards, the tax rate will be 30-1. During Ren Xian's reign, the Great Ming Dynasty was prosperous, and the treasury was full. However, after more than 10 years, Yingzong's hands had already begun to show signs of decline. For this reason, Zhu Qizhen had always been searching for a way to fill the treasury. Thus, the business tax became his goal. After seeing the prosperity of the Immortal abode yesterday, Yingzong returned to the palace and immediately came up with the idea of collecting the business tax. For no other reason than the fact that as the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, he couldn't even replace all the windows in the palace with glass. This made him feel a strong sense of defeat. In fact, Ing Zong still had something he didn't say out loud. As the emperor of a country, he actually wasn't as capable as an official who was younger than him. Yang Chendong could cover the immortal abode with glass, but as the emperor of a country, he couldn't. Didn't this mean that he wasn't even as good as an official? This was what he found hard to accept. Today, Yu Qian just so happened to mention that he wanted to collect the business tax from the immortal abode. How could Ing Zong be polite? He agreed in person and sent his most trusted teacher, Wang Zhen, to carry out this task. In Zhu Qizhen's heart, Wang Zhen was one of his own. If he was sent to carry out this task, he definitely wouldn't treat him unfairly. Wang Zhen hadn't expected this kind of result. Last night, Wang Wenyi had found him and reported this matter, but he hadn't taken it to heart. Even though he had the power and influence to nip everything in the bud, he hadn't done so. He'd also witnessed the prosperity of the immortal abode and saw its potential. He was also afraid that Yang Chendong would grow too big and become a threat to him. That was why he'd wanted to use the imperial censor to warn the sixth young master. Wang Zhen had long thought that this kind of impeachment wouldn't be of much use. It involved all of the third rank and above officials in the capital. Even if he didn't do anything himself, these people alone would be enough to stop the imperial censor's mouth. What he hadn't expected was that Yu Qian would take the initiative to jump out and say that he wanted to collect the business tax from the immortal abode. This caught him completely off guard. Fortunately, this matter still had to go through his hands. This became a bargaining chip in his negotiations with Yang Chendong. After witnessing the prosperity of the immortal abode, Wang Zhen was no longer satisfied with the 10% they'd agreed on. Yu Qian's sudden interruption caused the imperial censor's impeachment to fail. However, it seemed like there was no victor, because the immortal abode had to pay the tax and pay the price. In the end, the court assembly dispersed. The imperial censors left under the warning gazes of the officials. Not long after, Wang Zhen also left the palace, heading straight for the Yang Manor 15 li south of the city. Before leaving, Su Yozhen had already reported the situation of today's morning court assembly to the Bureau of Security. At that moment, Yang Chendong was in his study, looking at the report Tiger's Mane had sent over regarding today's morning court assembly. Because of Yu Qian's appearance, the outcome of what had originally been a muddled case had actually turned against him. He couldn't help but laugh in anger. This Yu Qian isn't fun at all. He's far from being as cute as that smoking, drinking, and perming guy from the future. Young master, what perming? Qiao Yin, who was serving him from the side, inadvertently overheard this and couldn't help but ask curiously. It's nothing. The young master was just thinking about some things and was just talking to himself. Yang Chendong couldn't help but laugh. Soon after, his expression became calm again. Yu Qian was a capable, talented, and upright official. What was even more rare was that this kind of person cared more about the people and not the king. Otherwise, in history, Zhu Qizhen wouldn't have been captured and he wouldn't have loudly said, "We are completely thinking for the country and not for ourselves." Then, Zhu Qiyu, the successor patriarch, wouldn't have ascended to the throne. He wasn't blindly loyal and was talented. If this kind of person came to Qiqian City, he would definitely be of great help to the new army and the new city's development. Yang Chendong liked talent. He knew what he needed to do. But as for Yu Qian, although he liked him, he also knew that now wasn't the time to recruit him. Even if he tried to recruit him, it would never work. If he wanted to be used by him, he could only use force. How would he use force? When would he use force? This was what Yang Chendong needed to consider. Forget it. Since you don't want to be an assistant minister, then I'll fulfill your wish. He smiled. He had already thought of a way to solve Yu Qian's problem, and it would be done once and for all. With a rough idea in mind, Yang Chendong began to consider the issue of taxation. When it came to doing business, paying taxes was a matter of course. However, this was not the case in the Ming Dynasty. They didn't collect taxes from officials, eunuchs, or scholars. These three didn't just refer to business taxes, but agricultural taxes as well. This made the rich and powerful even richer. The commoners had to work hard for an entire year, but they couldn't even afford to buy food and clothing. With such a trend, the Ming Dynasty's treasury became poorer and poorer. Yang Qindong understood this principle, which was why he used his status to open the Immortal abode. Just by avoiding taxes, he could save a lot of money in a year. But he hadn't expected that Ing Zong would suddenly use Yu Qian to make such a move, catching him off guard. He couldn't help but wonder if it was because of his appearance that Ing Zong's thoughts had changed. If that was the case, then it wasn't a good thing. Yang Qindong wasn't a god, so he naturally had no way of knowing what kind of psychological changes Ing Zong would experience. However, there was one thing he had to take care of, and that was the issue of the Immortal abode's taxes. Since the emperor had brought it up in court, it would be quite troublesome to avoid paying. How to reduce the amount of taxes needed to be considered. Fortunately, this matter had been left to Wang Zhen. If it had been left to Yu Qian, it would have been a real headache. However, even Wang Zhen was someone who ate people without spitting out their bones. He had to carefully consider how to deal with him. Outside the Yang clan manor, Wang Zhen had arrived. He had his own carriage, and there wasn't a single member of the embroidered uniform guard or the Eastern faction guards that didn't recognize him. When the carriage approached, a group of people knelt on the ground. Wang Zhen had long since gotten used to this kind of situation. He didn't even get out of the carriage, and directly drove towards the Yang clan manor's inner courtyard. Right now, the potato harvest was about to begin. Anyone who entered the Yang clan manor had to be strictly checked. Only someone of Wang Zhen's status could act so unbridled. The carriage continued forward until it reached the Yang clan manor's courtyard. When they didn't see Yang Qindong's figure, the embroidered uniform guard commander Qian Shi, who was also Wang Zhen's nephew, Wang Lin, arrogantly said, "What's wrong? You're just washing a horse. Why are you putting on such airs? Could it be that you don't know how to come out and welcome us?" The two servants, Yang Wu and Yang Lu, who were secretly paying attention to the movements in front of the courtyard, had sullen expressions on their faces. Their fists gradually clenched as they reached for their pistols by their waists. It was only a distance of 20 steps. They were confident that they could take the life of the person who shouted with a hook of their fingers. Chapter 106. Ha ha ha, I didn't know that eunuch Wang would grace me with his presence. Forgive me for being late, a boisterous laugh rang out as Yang Qindong strode to the entrance of the courtyard. Ma Yang Xianji is too polite. How could this eunuch not feel embarrassed? Wang Zhen, dressed in the robes of a eunuch, stepped out of the carriage and walked over to Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong's smile was the type that hid a knife in his sleeve, but Wang Zhen's smile was also the type that didn't reach his eyes. In the end, the two of them had only come together temporarily for the sake of mutual benefits. They couldn't even be considered allies, so how could they show their sincerity? Yang Qindong bowed and politely said, "Eunuch Wang, please. Sixth young master, please." Wang Zhen heartily laughed and led the way forward, pulling Yang Qindong 2 steps behind. It was as if he was saying that this was his residence, not the Yang clan manor. Once the host and guest were seated in the main hall, a very ordinary servant brought 2 cups of tea before bowing and retreating. Whenever Yang Qindong's guests came, Xiao Yin would bring them tea, but Wang Zhen didn't even get to enjoy this treatment. From this, one could see that in the eyes of the 6th young master, this person wasn't even worth an ordinary guest. Wang Zhen naturally didn't know about the Yang clan manor. The Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard had countless spies, and many of the important officials of the capital were under surveillance. However, this didn't include Yang Qindong. Not being qualified was one thing, but this place was already surrounded by spies, so there was no need to keep an eye on them. The tea is not bad. It's much better than the last time. Looks like the sixth young master has earned quite a bit of money. Wang Zhen said with a fake smile after dipping his lips into the tea as if it was for show. Yang Chendong knew that Wang Zhen was reminding him, so he smiled and said, "You're too kind. This is all thanks to Eunuch Wang's good fortune. Of course, Eunuch Wang has a share of the Immortal Abode's income." AI. Wang Zhen let out a long sigh, as if depressed. He glanced at Yang Chendong out of the corner of his eye, then fell silent. His expression seemed to be saying, "Hurry up and ask me why I'm sighing." How could Yang Chendong not know what Wang Zhen meant when he pretended to be depressed? Since he was going to put on an act, of course he had to go all the way. He immediately went along with the other party's wishes and asked curiously, "Why is Eunuch sighing?" After a moment's silence, Wang Zhen finally spoke, Eunuch Wang, yesterday's, Wang Zhen's. You didn't know that there were people because you teat yours, 8, teat know that. T's, eunuch. Of such, teat, s. Which bastard can't bear to see others doing well and came up with such a despicable idea? I curse him to die a horrible death. Yang Chendong flew into a rage. His usual gentlemanly demeanor was nowhere to be found. He stood up from his chair and began cursing. She scolded Wang Zhen to the point that he frowned. He thought to himself, where does this look like someone who is well-read? This is clearly one of those unreasonable shrews. Wang Zhen listened to Yang Chendong's cursing for a good while. Then, as if he was tired, he sat back down in his chair, panting. Eunuch Wang, tell me who did it. I'll buy his life with silver. His words were spoken in an imposing manner. In reality, Yang Chendong was indeed very rich. He'd earned over 2 million taels of silver from the Immortal Abode's membership cards alone, and that wasn't even counting the people who'd be applying for membership cards soon. There were a few people who'd been waiting to see if the Immortal Abode was as good as they'd been described. After yesterday's events, these people probably wouldn't hesitate any longer. Wouldn't the money still roll in? With money, Yang Chendong's words naturally became much more confident. Now that he'd dared to say that he'd buy his life with money, it made sense. At the very least, it suited his current mood. Seeing Yang Chendong so angry that he'd even go so far as to say that he'd buy his life with money, Wang Zhen couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Youngsters are youngsters, after all. They can't keep their cool. One had to understand that these words were already quite a bit of leverage. Even if Wang Zhen used these words to arrest Yang Chendong, the other officials wouldn't be able to say anything. However, Yang Chendong still had a use for him, so he might as well keep his life for now. Since he was a fat sheep, the fatter it was, the more meat he'd get when slaughtered. AI. Wang Zhen let out another long sigh. His tone was earnest, as if he were an elder lecturing a junior. Sixth young master, you shouldn't be so impulsive. Not everything can be solved with silver. Alright, you don't need to worry. This duke has already taken care of the matters in the morning court. Taken care of? Yang Chendong pretended to be extremely shocked. At first, he was dumbfounded. Then, as if he'd understood something, he laughed heartily. That's right. How could I have forgotten about father-in-law? With father-in-law's abilities, wouldn't resolving such a small matter be a piece of cake? When Wang Zhen saw that Yang Chendong was about to start flattering him, he was worried that he'd continue to nag for a long time. He hurriedly waved his hands and said, "The matter of your impeachment has been resolved. However, the current emperor has also issued an imperial edict that the Immortal Abode must pay taxes. He's even delegated this task to this duke. Sixth young master, what do you think we should do?" Yang Chendong, who just calmed down, immediately jumped to his feet when he heard the words taxes. Taxes? Why? The other officials don't have to pay taxes. Even those who haven't yet become officials don't have to pay taxes. This young master is still a 5th-rank official, isn't he? Why should I pay taxes? I'm not paying. Yang Chendong's face was completely that of a scoundrel. When Wang Zhen saw all of this, his evaluation of Yang Chendong in his heart became even lower. Wasn't this person supposed to do great things? How did this immortal abode manage to come up with so many tricks? Wang Zhen felt a bit of disdain in his heart, but he didn't let it show on his face. On the contrary, he put on a look of concern for Yang Chendong. This is an imperial edict from His Majesty. Why don't you pay some taxes first? Do I really have to pay them? When he heard the words His Majesty, Yang Chendong seemed to calm down a lot. However, he leaned forward and said in a quiet voice, "Father-in-law, you also have shares in the immortal abode. If you have to pay taxes, then you'll have to share in father-in-law's profits as well. I only have 10%. It's nothing much. Even if I have to split it, I probably won't get much." Wang Zhen acted as if he didn't care at all. He really didn't seem to care, but Yang Chendong knew that after so many years of monopolizing power, Wang Zhen had long since developed a habit of doing everything he wanted. When it came to splitting his wealth, he probably wouldn't even ask for a single copper coin less. Similarly, once money entered his pocket, he probably wouldn't be willing to part with it if he couldn't take it out. The only reason he said this was because he wanted to fish for more benefits. Knowing the other party's temperament was the same as knowing his trump card. Yang Chendong sighed and said, "Fine. Since this is His Majesty's wish, then this subject will pay. However, this way, father-in-law's monthly income will be much less." He had originally been immensely pleased with himself, waiting to see what kind of price Yang Chendong would pay to refuse to pay the taxes. However, he didn't expect that Yang Chendong would actually cower and agree. What was the meaning of this? This script was completely different from what he had imagined. At this moment, it was Wang Zhen who was put in a difficult position. If he really had to pay the taxes, he would naturally have to share his benefits. Just as Yang Chendong thought, for a person with such great power, he would always be the one to receive benefits. How could he possibly push the benefits away? "No, you can pay the taxes, but you can't give me a share. Of course, I will take a little bit less as a token of appreciation." Wang Zhen's reaction was extremely fast. In just a few breaths of time, he had thought of a countermeasure and expressed his thoughts. "Ah." Yang Chendong pretended to be shocked as he looked at Wang Zhen. Soon after, he stuttered, "Eunuch means that your share won't change. Then how will it be calculated?" "This tax will definitely be deducted from the general account. No matter, I'll split my share first. The rest will be taxed according to the ratio." Wang Zhen's eyes narrowed as he spoke with a smile, as if he was talking about something insignificant. Yang Chendong cursed Wang Zhen's greed inwardly. He put on a troubled expression and replied, "But if we do that, it will affect the operations of the sky beyond heaven. I won't hide it from father-in-law. Originally, I was planning to use the immortal abode's income to purchase goods for the Sky Beyond Heaven Trading Company. You also know that glass and mirrors are all very expensive. Without sufficient funds, it's impossible to do anything. And if we succeed, we'll earn mountains of gold and silver. At that time, I was even prepared to give father-in-law 40% of the profits. Sigh, I'm afraid that once we pay the taxes, we won't have enough funds." He shook his head bitterly as he slammed his palms on the table, as if he really had missed out on something good. "Wait a moment." Wang Zhen originally had a cold expression, waiting for Yang Chendong to take the initiative to give him some benefits. However, when he heard that 40% of the profits would be given, his expression immediately changed. He could no longer maintain his previous calm. "Sixth young master, what did you just say? 40%? That's right. 40%. Yang Chendong nodded with an expression that said it was indeed so. Then he added, of course, this is under the condition that there is a large amount of available funds. For example, if Eunuch Wang can lend me 2 million taels of silver, in addition to the fact that I don't have to worry about taxes, it is reasonable to take out 40% of the benefits. Unfortunately, since even His Majesty has issued a decree, I'm afraid that it will be very difficult to fulfill. An extremely regretful expression appeared on his face, as if all the beautiful things had vanished into thin air. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.